and welcome to the Foggy Dew. This is Colin. Well, gang, I wanted to go ahead and get a quick episode out regarding the Voting Rights Act. I had actually recorded the prior episode about 2 or 3 hours before that decision dropped on Wednesday. So I'm sitting here, I had sent the episode over to my producer for publication, and then within like a couple hours, I got a text from a loyal Foggy Dew listener saying, hey, you were right. And I'm like, sure, right about what? And then obviously I open up my social media feed and it's all over the place. I have spoken so much about the Voting Rights Act and what was going to happen here. I think it became obvious as time went along, from the arguments themselves to the leak that we found out about just a week ago or so. This is just a huge decision by the Supreme Court. And quite frankly, I immersed myself in liberal media last night watching the response to it, because always watch the response. It gives the entire game away. But I'll go ahead and get into my thoughts on the Voting Rights Act and really what that means. But I saw these polls and I wanted to frame this discussion correctly. These polls are absolutely insane to me. And the reason why I want to go through these polls is because this should give everybody an understanding of who exactly are the leaders in the Democrat Party. Where are we going politically with the Democrat Party? Who is going to be the standard bearer? Who are the frontrunners for 2028? Who is the intellectual thought leader? Well, there is a clear frontrunner here based on the polling that I'm seeing. So this is a Harvard-Harris poll. And what this does is it breaks out Democrat voters by race, which I can't stand, but here we go. So with black Democrats, Kamala Harris is at 71%. 71% for black Democrats for 2028. She is by far in pole position with black voters. Gavin Newsom, 15%. Steep drop off after that. Pritzker, 5%. Shapiro, 4%. AOC, 3%. Well, that's black folks. Now look at white Democrats. White Democrats, Harris, 41%. She's at plus 10 trend. Gavin Newsom, 26, -6. And then you got Shapiro, Pritzker, and AOC right at about 10% respectively. Then you get in Hispanic Democrats, Kamala Harris, 50%. She's trending plus 13 with Hispanics. Newsom, 23%. AOC, 11, Shapiro, 8, Pritzker, 5. Then you get into Asian Democrats. Harris, 50%. She's trending negative with Asians, apparently. Shapiro, 16%. Newsom, 12%. He's trending -7 with Asian Democrat voters. You got AOC at 9. That's a Harvard-Harris poll just literally from a few days ago. And I want to frame, again, my point in going through these polling numbers is to understand, like, what is the Democrat Party's plan? Who is the leader? And I think you can infer from that from anywhere from 50%, 41%, 50%, and then 71%. Kamala Harris is absolutely your frontrunner for the Democrat nomination in 2028. There was no deviation on the names off those 5. It's AOC, Shapiro, Pritzker, and Newsom. Newsom, you could look at Minnesota and what's going on with Tim Walz in Minnesota. Gavin Newsom is next on that hit list of fraud, and Nick Shirley. Gavin Newsom, J.B. Pritzker, and Shapiro are all dead men walking politically. And I just mentioned Nick Shirley. I guess the people doing these polls aren't familiar with Nick Shirley and his work. Look at the timeline here. That Somali fraud video in Minnesota dropped around Christmas time. I think it was like New Year's weekend or something like that. That was just, 4 or 5 months ago? So here we are 4 or 5 months later after this random video fell out of the sky onto X, and Tim Walz is finished politically. It didn't even take 4 to 5 months. It took like a month and a half before Tim Walz was finished politically, and 4 to 5 months before Somali daycares and fraud rings were being raided and people were being arrested. That's how long it took. That process is going to replicate itself in California. Gavin Newsom is toast. I've talked about it on the show before. He's trending negative with most of these demographics. But I would tell you that Gavin Newsom thinking that he's going to be president of the United States, or anybody in that camp that think that that man's a viable candidate, that is delusion on steroids. And let's be honest, J.B. Pritzker is not that far away from Gavin Newsom. I just don't think Nick Shirley's flown into O'Hare Airport yet. If you think LA and California are bad, what do you think Illinois looks like? Illinois is like $1 trillion in unfunded liabilities. Yeah, I'm sure that money's all accounted for. No fraud in Illinois. And J.B. Pritzker is the lead barker in that circus. And then you just move on down the chain. Look at Josh Shapiro. Shapiro is totally unelectable in a national election. Unelectable. And not only is he unelectable, Pennsylvania's on Nick Shirley's radar. So those 4 out of your 5, and I guess AOC, go ahead, man. If AOC is the horse that you want to ride into the barn, go ahead and do it. But the fact that she's included at a double-digit number in some of these demographics is mind-blowing. So again, the inference here is that Kamala Harris is in pole position. And if you're asking me today, looking at 2028, you got Kamala Harris is by far the front runner. I think Mark Cuban is going to be in that mix. Pete Buttigieg, and then I think Hillary Clinton might stick her nose into that whole affair. It's going to be some combination of those 4 people. And I think Mark Cuban's going to buy his way in. But overall, Kamala Harris is at 50%. That's a huge plurality. That's going to be hard to overcome. Because perception becomes reality in a lot of these races. She's seen as inevitable at a certain point, and that it's a lead. You get into a lead like that in a political game, it's going to be really hard for anybody coming from behind. And there are a lot of moving pieces going into 2028, a lot of moving pieces, but Kamala Harris looks to me like the one that's going to be the most viable. Kamala Harris 2028 with some configuration behind her. Trust me, I'm going to be watching. I think it's totally fascinating. Okay, I wanted to frame that. So we will all be watching 2028 very, very closely. So moving directly into the Voting Rights Act, I guess the only takeaway that you can have is that the Voting Rights Act was defanged the other day. It was ruled unconstitutional. The Supreme Court decision regarding the Voting Rights Act was knocked down as unconstitutional by a 6-3 decision. And I think anybody being fair would agree that Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act was racist on its face. That provision in the Voting Rights Act took race into congressional map drawing at the state level. And I've got good news for every liberal out there, true liberal. The Supreme Court just ruled that we're all Americans. We're not Black Americans. We're not brown Americans. We're not red. We're not white. We're not yellow. We're just Americans. And that is the correct legal conclusion to draw. Race-based congressional districts are basically separate but equal. What it's doing, it's using race to divide Americans. And just as a huge overarching statement, the Constitution of the United States, when applied correctly in a textualist interpretation, is amazing. My main takeaway from this entire thing with the Voting Rights Act is that the 3 dissents are the problem. You had a 6-3 majority. The 3 people that dissented on this issue are a major league problem to the rule of law in the United States. Because Kagan, Sotomayor, and Justice Jackson did not write dissents to this. They wrote eulogies. They wrote eulogies. This was a performative bloodletting by these people. And just to be totally clear, those 3 justices, the air quotes liberal justices, ruled to keep racism alive. They wanted black and brown people separated. They want racial carve-outs. And the only thing that I can tell you about those 3 justices, those folks do not apply law. They are writing their emotions in their dissents. They're not interpreting and ruling on law. What they're doing is they're emoting on law. And my own conclusion on that, looking at everything that I read, everything that was talked about in the media, it appears to me that the three dissents either don't understand the law or they actively want to subvert it. This should have been a 9-0 decision. The 14th and the 15th Amendment to the United States Constitution prohibit racial profiling. The 14th and 15th Amendment were written to protect slaves and minorities in Reconstruction. These amendments, these were liberations of historical minorities. They were a liberation back then in Reconstruction, not a shackling. Justice Kagan claimed that this decision was, quote, setting back racial equality and electoral opportunity, end quote. Setting back racial equality and electoral opportunity. Man, that's dense. And it's really not fair. Racial outcomes are her goal, apparently. She wants racial quotas. She wants perpetual race segregation. What is that? That's what her and the other justices wanted. Perpetual race segregation based on color. And I guess my question is, how did they arrive at that conclusion? How would a justice that is on the Supreme Court arrive at a conclusion that keeping race as a factor in drawing maps makes sense? And the only thing that I can arrive at is I guess that's how law is being taught now. Text, precedent, history, apparently are all irrelevant. Not only are they irrelevant, they're totally immaterial. The only thing I can tell you is that law is black and white. You're reading words. Words are not colored. But I guess if you base everything that your assumption that the law isn't neutral, if you determine in your worldview that the law isn't neutral and words are not black and white, then all sorts of things are possible. If your worldview includes an idea that the law sees color or race, then by default, you would try to bend the law to fit the racial shoe. It's like legal shoehorning. You're not reading the words. What you're doing, you're overlaying morality onto it. You're not deriving information from the text. You're overlaying moral imperative to words. The worldview of the dissent is that law is racist and therefore I must thwart the law. I hear this phrase all the time, systemic racism. Systemic racism in the law is a canard. It is a red herring. There is absolutely no law that is racist. And let's be honest, if there is, tell me which one it is and I will work with anybody to get rid of it. If there's a racist law, let's get rid of it. 1,000%. But the problem with it is there aren't any. There aren't any racist laws. So if there aren't any racist laws, then how is the system racist? Systemic racism, the phrase, implies that the system is racist. How could this system be racist if there is no racist law? If nobody can show me a racist law, then isn't systemic racism fake? But I guess this is the mental gymnastics that's being taught in law school, not history, not text, not composition. They're teaching law students that law is pliable to moral imperative. That's how you get 3 dissents in a case like this. And the dissents are actually real lawfare. That is real lawfare because it's emotional sabotage on the rule of law. It's usurping the law. It's twisting it. These people are using ideology to interpret law. And it's almost like the Dobbs decision. The Dobbs decision to return Roe was the correct legal decision based on the 10th Amendment. That decision that was absolutely correct per the letter of the law was lamented by emotional partisans. And it's been established in legal circles, the Constitution is law. It's not a pliable, emotive suicide pact. The Constitution is written, it clearly defines enumerated power, and it subscribes negative liberties to the federal. Every person under the law should be equal. I will die on that hill. Every citizen of the United States should be equal before the law. We are all the same. But what do I tell people? Watch the response. And I'm going to go through some of these because it blew my mind. These are the leaders of the Democrat Party. These are the people that are in front pole position for the 2020 nomination for Democrat president. These are their own words. Here is J.B. Pritzker on X. Quote, J.B. Pritzker, one of the leaders for Democrat primary in 2028. Quote, we must call this for what it is. Voter suppression that will silence black and brown voters. The magnitude of this decision cannot be understated. It guts the Voting Rights Act and its very purpose of protecting all voices. Every American deserves an equal vote. End quote. Yes, every American does deserve an equal vote. Not based on the color of their skin, JB. Here's Gavin Newsom, another leader. Gavin Newsom, quote, this decision is outrageous. MAGA is scared of you. They know that when they lose black, Latino, and diverse voices are heard, they shut them up and rig the maps. We're not backing down. November is coming. Oh, okay. End quote. MAGA is scared of you. They know when they lose black, Latino, and diverse voices. So every black, Latino, and diverse voice was just silenced by this? No, they were told they were equal to everybody else. We're not backing down. November is coming. Go to war. Newsom's going to war, man. Here's Hakeem Jeffries, and I'm only putting him in here because he's the ranking Democrat. Here's Hakeem Jeffries. Quote, voter suppression is a way of life for Donald Trump and far-right extremists on the Supreme Court. Republicans know they cannot win a free and fair election in November, so they are desperate to rig it. We will never let them succeed. End quote. This is the ranking Democrat. Voter suppression is a way of life for Donald Trump. It's always about Donald Trump. And far-right extremists on the Supreme Court. The language. What did I say? It's a MAGA court. It's a Donald Trump court. It's an extreme court. That gives them the moral imperative to try to stack it with liberal justices. We will never let them succeed. He's in a war, man. Here's Nancy Pelosi. Another leader in the party. Quote, today, the Supreme Court has dealt a devastating new blow to the Voting Rights Act against the sacred right to vote. The consequences will be felt across the country, fewer voices heard, fewer communities represented, and a democracy diminished. This goes on, end quote on her. Fewer communities and a democracy. It's always with the democracy. Here's Mark Elias, who's the head lawfare guy in the Democrat Party. This guy's the guy that filed 1,000 lawsuits when Trump was sworn in 2025. Mark Elias, the pit bull of the Democrat Party, quote, today's VRA decision is intellectually dishonest and wrong. The conservatives basically said black people can vote for their preferred candidates as long as they prefer the right candidates, which will be Republicans. An absolute mockery of the law and a stain on the court, end quote. This guy's an attorney. Intellectually dishonest and wrong? So it's intellectually dishonest and wrong to ask that people be treated fairly before the law. This is coming from an attorney. Here's the bigwig, Kamala Harris. Quote, here's Kamala Harris. This lays at 40 to 71% based on demographics. Quote, today's Supreme Court ruling guts the Voting Rights Act and turns back the clock on the foundational promise of equality and fairness in our election system. Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act was one of the last remaining federal protections for black and brown voters against maps deliberately drawn to dilute their political power. That protection has been stripped away. It is an outrage. But it is not a surprise. It is part of an agenda that conservatives set in place decades ago to steal power from everyday people and then cling to that power for generations. The court's decision is motivated by politics and designed to give an upper hand to Donald Trump's Republican Party, which faces the threat of losing the upcoming midterm elections. End quote. last remaining federal protections for black and brown voters again. Did they lose the right to vote? They can still vote. They can vote just this. Their vote counts just the same as a white person, just the same as an Asian person, just the same as any. What is the problem? Federal protections for you for what? Turns back the clock on the foundational promise of equality and fairness. Are you joking? It updated the clock. She's the leader. Actually, she's not the leader. Listen to this. Here's Barack Obama. They all take their cues off Obama. Barack Obama, quote, "Today's Supreme Court decision effectively guts a key pillar of the Voting Rights Act, freeing state legislatures to gerrymander legislative districts to systematically dilute and weaken the power of racial minorities. So long as they do it under the guise of partisanship rather than explicit racial bias. And it just serves as one more example of how a majority of the current court seems intent on abandoning its vital role in ensuring equal participation in our democracy and protecting the rights of minority groups against majority overreach." Dude, end quote. Obama's the guy to watch. He was for gerrymandering last week. He was all about gerrymandering in Virginia when it served them. He's for it one week, but now he's against it. The language that these folks use galls me. We are a constitutional republic, not a democracy. This man, Barack Obama, came on and said, "I'm a constitutional scholar." So the self-described constitutional scholar comes up with this. In a republic, the goal is liberty and protecting the rights of the minority. The exact opposite of what Barack Obama just said. A republic isn't equal participation in democracy. And I can tell you, as somebody that studies the English language, when you say equal participation in democracy and then demonstrably act against it, it tells you everything. Equal participation in democracy sounds like Pol Pot, sounds like Mao, sounds like Marx, sounds like Stalin. His language, that's the language of collectivism. Workers unite. And I think everybody, it's been laid bare, at least on the Foggy Dew, that the goal here for Barack Obama is not equality. His goal is to have the power to draw lines as he sees fit. His goal is not to fix the house, it's to control it. His whole framing of this conversation is totally at odds with the idea of a constitutional republic that our founders left. He believes in the power of the party. He believes in the power of the state. His words sound great. If you just read that and you don't know anything, you'd be like, yeah, man, that makes a lot of sense. People are the rights are taken, man, that's a big bummer. It's a flowery spin on language, but not any substance of real law. It misses the point of a republic. And I guess my only commentary on this is that these are ideological issues. He does not believe, Barack Obama, Kamala Harris, none of these people, they do not believe intellectually in the premise that the Constitution is law, that the Constitution is a limiting document to majority rule. And I said it before, this man is the figurehead. Barack Obama is the apex of a party focused on power. This is a party that doesn't want ID to vote. They don't want citizenship to vote. They brought in tens of millions of illegals to dilute your vote. They dilute election integrity. They draw districts to suit their purposes. I just really wish that these guys would argue intellectual positions. You can't have a conversation with somebody like this. I'm sitting here and going, hey, it's great. There's no such thing as black Americans, brown Americans, all Americans. I'm celebrating that. That's an intellectual position. But it seems to me with this type of response, they want to break the system so they don't have to have a debate anymore. And I guess if you look at the entire scam of this, and that's what it is, it's a scam. It's the illegals. It's the mail-in ballots. It's the no ID to vote. Their entire scam is obvious. They're trying to rig all this stuff. And the thing that they really have a problem with is that their scam is being dismantled and they know it. They know it. That's why they're this upset. They know that the scam is being exposed and they know that the scam is over. 2026 is the Democrat Party's Alamo. They have to win there because 2028, I just went through the numbers. 2028 ain't looking good. If Kamala Harris is your lead horse, I mean, you got problems. You got big problems. And the reality is you've got 2026, that's their Alamo. 2028 looks like a disaster for them. And by 2030, the maps are terminal for the Democrat Party. Terminal. Anyway, I just wanted to get my thoughts out because, again, always watch the response. This was the response. Go and look at their quotes on X. And the funny, if you want to laugh, go look at the comments. Barack Obama has 41,000 comments on his deal. 41,000 people chimed in, and they are ratioing this dude like crazy. Only the sycophants and the ideologues are buying this anymore. Anyway, I was very happy to see that the Voting Rights Act was knocked down as unconstitutional. I think that's a great thing for a constitutional republic. I think it's a great thing for equality. How wonderful. But unfortunately, we have a bunch of race hustlers and people that just want unlimited power that really don't care about that. Okay, quick programming note. I may or may not have a show next week. I'm going to be out of town for, I think, Monday through Thursday, but I'll do the best I can. I just want to put a quick note out there. Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. If you like this show, please go ahead and tell a friend about it. If you would, please follow us on Spotify. You can also follow us on Instagram at Foggy Dew Daily. If you have questions for the show, please go ahead and email us at foggydew95@gmail.com. But in the meantime, I'd ask you to say a prayer, ask questions, and stay vigilant. This is the Foggy Dew signing off.